Well, good afternoon, everybody on the East Coast. Good earlier afternoon on the West Coast. It is October 11th, 2023. It's Wednesday, which means it's material issues time. Episode number 124. I'm Mark Hershberger of Pop Detective Records. Joining me, as usual, my cohort out on the West Coast, the president of the International Pop Overthrow Festival, Mr. David Bash. David, it's great to see you. I can say this afternoon because it's still officially this afternoon here on the East Coast. So,
Yeah, my brother Joel and I were talking about that, and he said, "Oh, now Mark's going to get it right." So,
finally going to get it right. Took me 124 episodes to, say good afternoon, and it's right. But yeah,
yeah,
what's going on, my friend? Everything,
beautiful
everything
day
good?
out.
And
Beautiful day out here. I'm decked out in one of my new shirts by a company called French Crown. They do some really cool stuff. This shirt was only like $60, so
no,
I,
nice.
and it's nice material, and yeah, looks good. And of course, with that, I had to pull out something I hadn't worn for a while, but it matches really well. This is my Paul Rich. It's just a really nice deep green, has the date, uh, gold trim, very basic watch, but also I love green dials,
Yeah.
and this one, yeah. The only thing I don't love is that it's quartz. As you know, I don't really like the tick,
Right.
but it's I'll take it to get the rest of the stuff for the price that it was. So
Yeah.
that goes well with a shirt. So I've got that. On a more down note, yeah, what's going on in Israel is certainly
Yeah, indeed.
worrying me. I have family there.
Yeah.
Besides
Yeah.
the fact that it's my ancestral homeland, and Rena and I got married in Tel Aviv, it it does concern me. All the lives that are. Thank you, Tim. Good
It's
afternoon.
yeah,
All the
it's
lives that are being lost, whatever side you're on the debate. And I don't need to get into that. Obviously, I'm going to be. I mean, it's my ancestral home. I have a kinship with it. I'm going to be on the side of Israel. Whatever side you're on, the one thing you have to agree though is this is awful. This
yeah,
really is awful. Innocent lives are being lost.
no doubt,
Uh,
no
it's
doubt.
not. It's not just the people who are angry at each other. It's people who are just living their life, trying to live their lives, and be good people, and they're dying over this, and it's just awful. And I hope somehow a resolution is found. Like I said, I have some family there. They're not living. They don't live in near Gaza Strip, thankfully.
Right, yeah.
Um, my aunt, for example, lives near Jerusalem, and she says more or less things are status quo there.
Hmm.
People are still living their lives. Obviously, they're concerned and they're on alert because anything could happen at any time.
Right,
But
yeah.
it's not, and they do go to shelters like an hour a day, mainly as practice, I suppose, in case something really does happen there. But beyond that, they're going out, they're doing stuff, businesses are open. So that's good at least. But you never know how this thing's going to escalate, and it's very concerning, and not just for the people of Palestine or Israel, but for the whole world if other countries start getting involved in this. So
Yeah.
you don't know what it could lead to. So hopefully, somehow, some way, it gets eradicated,
Well,
and
yeah.
things will
Hard,
never be okay. We don't
yeah.
expect that, but at least let's have the fighting and the loss of innocent lives stopped.
Yeah.
Um, so
Work it,
anyway,
work,
I we
work it out
yeah
in a
I
different way.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm not going to go off on my soapbox about it. This isn't the time or place. Um, so as far as IPO goes, yeah, again, things are in place there for New York and
Right.
Boston. Toronto, I'm about to send out the schedule probably tomorrow, and so things will be in place for that one as well. I'm very excited. A lot of bands that I haven't seen for a while, definitely some that I want to see, and well, I want to see them all, but some I haven't seen yet, and
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing. Um, so yeah, it's all exciting, and it'll all start on November 9th in New York City, and then the following weekend Boston, following weekend Toronto. Um, Speaking of IPO, our guest actually did play an international pop overthrow, a couple of shows. People may not know this, but he was, along with my good friend Ken Curson, was in a cover band called the Editors, and they did some really, really cool stuff.
Yeah.
I had no idea that he was in a band, but it shouldn't surprise me, certainly, given his background in music. Many of us read his magazine, Trouser Press. We learned a lot from it. I know I did.
Yep.
And I was one of the first people I know to buy I believe this is the fourth edition of the Trouser Press. That's right. I have some earlier editions, but this was the one I really paid attention to. It was definitely more oriented towards the 80s than anything else. And that was one decade where I really needed to learn the most. Things on radio had changed to where you weren't hearing a lot of guitar pop, but in this book, you would read about a lot of bands who were doing it. Yeah, there you go. This is Steve Schnee, who was one of the co-founders of Pop-Sided magazine, as you can see. He and I used to go record shopping a lot in the early 90s, and I know we talked about this book. So yeah, this book opened my eyes to all kinds of bands that, and also sometimes reinforced or challenged my belief about certain bands I liked. There are definitely some reviews in here that I don't agree with. Some that Ira wrote, some that he didn't. But anyway, I said our guest. Oh no, I revealed his name. And then this edition came out, the one about 90s rock, which also is very helpful to me, and to a lot of other people. And he's still doing things, and we owe him a great debt of gratitude. So we're glad he's here. Would you please give a huge Material Issues welcome to Mr. Ira Robbins?
Hello.
Hello, Ira.
Thank you for your forbearance with my schedule problem. I appreciate that.
No worries at all. This is wonderful to have you on here. Of course, you've meant so much to so many of us with your publications all those years. Great big thank you for the work. That was it's amazing body of work. Amazing body of work. It's something to be very proud of. Yeah,
thank you.
Outstanding.
Yeah, and one of the things about your writing that always made it a pleasure to read was that, unlike certain other people, Dave Marshall, you didn't come off as snobby in any way. You were a fan. It was obvious, but you also kept a bit of neutrality and never did seem condescending about anything, and even stuff you didn't like.
Oh, I can be pretty mean.
Not like some of the other people. At least that's how I took it.
Don't ask bare naked ladies about that.
No.
I didn't read that one because I already decided I didn't like them.
So if you decided you didn't like something, you didn't even read the review. It was already done.
Sometimes I did.
Okay,
sometimes
all right.
I wanted to see if he felt the same, or if whoever he had writing the review felt the same. In the second book, I should point out, the 90s book, some of my good friends, one of which may very well be listening right now, John Borak, along with Jordan Oakes, they wrote some entries in that book, which was nice to see.
Yeah, indeed. Ira, what led you down the path of writing, as far as not just listening to music, but actually becoming a writer? Did you want to do that from an early age? Were you a writing type of person, or did you kind of fall into this, like say, hey, I could do this?
I guess the best thing to say is that I backed into it. I went to engineering school, college, because I didn't want to have to read or write. That was kind of my higher education goal. I wasn't actually that interested in higher education. I grew up in the 60s, and I was involved in the radical movement of the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement, and kind of the far left edge of it. So that was kind of my focus for a while. And at that point, I was finishing high school. I was very active in politics. I love music ever since I'd heard the Beatles, of course. Actually, ever since I'd heard Del Shannon do "Hats Off to Larry" in 1961.
There you go.
But I decided that college wasn't really something I needed to do. I was just going to go fight the revolution, and so I went to an engineering school, and while I was there, my best high school friend and I, Dave Schultz, met a woman who had been the editor of the Brooklyn College newspaper, who was a couple years older than us, and who was a big Jeff Beck and Peter Frampton fan. And we met her at the legendary Frank Rita's house. And
yeah, I knew Frank.
Yeah, and at like a record hang, and decided that we would start a magazine. Now, I'd been writing for underground newspapers a little bit, so like I was kind of drawn into it mostly as a political effort, not really as a journalistic effort or as a musical effort. But then I kind of got bit by the bug. I mean, I was reading Cream and Circus and Hit Parader, and then, you know, Dave and I subscribed in high school even to Melody Maker on a surface mail subscription.
Wow, yeah,
rolled up into like a tube of like toilet paper at like 3 months or 4 months after it was published. But, you know, it didn't matter to us. You know, it wasn't like we were going to like, you know, go see the shows at the Marquee. We just wanted to know.
Yeah, in 1977, you got an issue that said, this new band called the Led Zeppelin is really making waves here.
No. But, so Dave and I and Karen Rose decided we would start a magazine, and, you know, we just kind of like did it. I mean, it didn't really, I always referred to it as a whim whose time had come. It wasn't really a plan. It wasn't like a goal. I mean, I've been sending some stuff off to magazines, and just before the first issue of Trouser Press came out in '74, I had my first thing published in Good Times, which was, you know, the local weekly giveaway on Long Island.
I was thinking of High Times for a second. Different idea. Yeah.
But yeah, and so, you know, we just basically, I mean, to answer your question, Mark, I mean, I didn't really set out to be a writer. I just kind of like had a lot of opinions and felt the need to express them. Like,
right, and yeah, and going down the route of bands that weren't getting the coverage. It was kind of your way of saying, well, you know, screw some of the other bigger publications that were just covering the Bruce Springsteens of the world or whatnot. You're going to do some things that were a little bit different. So
yeah,
the market was there for something like that.
Well, you know? I mean, market would be aggrandizing it a lot more than we were able to take advantage of.
Right.
But no, I mean, we felt that there were artists, especially British artists, that weren't getting written about in America. And we felt very kind of proselytic about that. Like we had to share the news about, you know, Peter Frampton, and, you know, who hadn't had the hit record yet, you know, who's just a guy that made records that nobody heard on A&M. You know, we were excited about Rory Gallagher, and we were excited about Family and Hawkwind, and, you know, a lot of weird bands that, you know, really hadn't, you know, a lot of them were being released here, but they weren't getting any, you know, traction. And, you know, like the magazines that existed were, you know, other than Cream, were pretty oriented towards, you know, chart action. You know, I mean, like Circus put, you know, bands that sold a lot of records on the cover. They weren't interested in discovering the next odd thing. But, you know, Cream did. So I'll give them some credit for that. You know, and there were other magazines. I mean, you know, we were inspired, obviously, by Greg Shaw and Alan Betrock. And we read Zigzag, you know, when it was Pete Frame's magazine coming out of London, and the British weeklies, you know. So, you know, we just kind of saw the gap, you know, and it wasn't like a marketing decision. It wasn't like, oh, you know, we see where we can fit in. It was like, we feel very strongly about these artists and no one's doing anything, so we're going to take up the challenge.
No, and I mean, Bomp certainly, as you mentioned, Greg, Bomp was certainly doing things in that regard. I mean, they were championing some very, very obscure bands, mostly in the power pop realm, and I guess mostly American. Was that the biggest gap that you saw? Like, we can fill in the British gap that they're not covering so much?
Well, I mean, you know, we did bill ourselves when we started as the alternative to the alternative alternatives. And we billed ourselves as America's only British rock magazine. But I wouldn't say that we thought of ourselves in any way as a corrective for what Greg wasn't doing. I mean, you know, Greg was way ahead of us. I mean, he started much earlier. He was, you know, much more established in LA than we were in New York. You know, he was much smarter about how to get a magazine out into the streets. And, you know, he had connections. I mean, he had Ken Barnes on his side, you know, which is you know, you can't really like argue that one. You know, we were kids. I mean, we were basically, you know, amateur kids. We didn't know anybody. I mean, literally, we didn't know anybody, you know, like, so we started with nothing. I mean, our first issue, you know, we mimeographed it on my dad's mimeograph machine, stapled it on my parents' coffee table, and took it down to the Academy of Music where Rory Gallagher was playing. and sold them for $0.25 on the street. Our one big marketing insight was that if we wrote about artists that were going to play in New York while the issue was out, we could sell them at their concerts.
True.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it was a weird idea, but those bands were touring, so it wasn't like we weren't looking for the Rolling Stones are playing, so we'll do the Rolling Stones. It was like, oh, Rory Gallagher's playing, Genesis is playing, who else did we do? Mott the Hoople, and then of course, because Dave and I were like diehard #1 Who fans. When the Who played in the Garden 4 nights in June of '74, we did a special issue. Issue number 3 was a special issue about the Who. And we sold it. We sold a few out at the concert, but basically, it was just kind of we gotten a few stores to take them, so it was just kind of we wanted to have an issue out for the Who being in New York that week.
So you literally stood outside the Garden with these copies and said, "Extra, read all about it."
Yeah, we didn't do it at the Garden because those shows were way too important for me to attend. I wasn't gonna go in with a bag of magazines in my hand. We had done a pretty good job of buying tickets, and we had I was in the first 15 rows for all 4 shows, and my hearing never recovered from it. But it was just that one we didn't sell that. Although I think after the second issue we did sell outside of the Felt Forum, which is the part of the Garden. Now it's called the Theater at Madison Square Garden, and one of the guys that we had attracted, Karen's. Actually got popped by the police for peddling without a license, and we had to pay a $25 ticket. So that was a brush with the law.
which was your sales for the night?
Yeah, that was a lot of money. Yeah.
Well, what at what point, or when was the realization that you could actually go further than just standing outside of a venue? What led you to believe that this is something that people want, and we need to get distribution in more areas?
The story that I tell, which is actually true, is we pretty much advanced one tiny baby step at a time. We printed one issue. Published would be way too exaggerated.
Yeah.
We printed one issue, sold them. I guess we had about 250 copies. We sold them, and then we kind of looked at each other the next day and said, "Hey, maybe we could do this again." I mean, we literally had not thought beyond one issue. It was kind of like if no one had bought it, that would have been it. I would never have met you guys. And then, a couple of issues later, we're like, we could sell, what happened was a couple of record stores in the city people who worked there who had bought the issue contacted us and said, "Hey, do you want to have, some copies in our store?" So all of a sudden we had copies in Discount Records on 8th Street and in Discophile, in a couple of other stores. And we just started seeing incremental progress. And so every little step that we were encouraged by, we took another step forward. And so, we improved our printing, and then we, added more pages. And then eventually we rented a good typewriter so that we could, more readable, we got off of mimeograph and we started, doing lithography, offset. And then, it was like, oh, we're going to do 2 color covers now. We're going to have a new printer and they can do glossy covers. And then we're going to have, eventually, it took us to issue 21, 3 years to get to a color cover. Full color cover.
Yeah.
So that's 3 years. Anybody who knows what they're doing and sets out to publish a magazine would have done that the first issue. But our original investment to start Trouser Press was under $75.
Wow.
It's just basically pocket change. We bought some reams of paper, we bought a mimeograph stencils, and we bought some ink, and that was literally, and some staples. That was literally it. So it took a while to get to the point where we were actually, seeing money coming back and forth. And, we worked out of an office that was actually technically known as the Grand Central Post Office for the first couple of years. We would meet at the tables, they have counters that you can wrap packages at. We would meet there. And then we learned how to do second class. We got a second class mailing permit so we could send our subscriptions at an affordable rate. It was literally one tiny step at a time, just guessing what the next thing was, So the answer to your question is there was never a moment where we thought, well, we could really do this. At some point we realized we could pay ourselves something, and then we could, for the next 7 years, that was my job. That was my living was working for Trouser Press.
Wow. The evolution of Trouser Press is not unlike the evolution of Bill James' baseball abstract. I don't know if you're a baseball fan at all. Bill James? Yeah, I mean, his first 4 issues were also self-mimeographed, self-stapled, everything. He didn't have a color cover either. Well, all right, he did have like a card. I don't remember. He had like a blue or yellow, rudimentary cardboard paper stock, and it wasn't black or white. But
Yeah,
that's all he had. For 4 years until finally he got the publishing deal with Ballantine Books, and then they started putting it out. And obviously, it was a little bit more upscale. But yeah, I mean, that's how a lot of the great ones. That's how it happened.
Yeah, I mean, the lesson, of course, I learned in retrospect was that it's really stupid to start something with no money, because you will be hamstrung your entire time doing it, because you'll never have enough money, and you'll always be more ambitious than you can afford to be. And the risks that you have to take in order to move it forward become more and more risky.
But what was your alternative back in those days?
There was none. I mean, we should have found somebody that thought we were really smart, funny kids and given us $10,000. I mean, when Spin started, we were just kind of on the way out when Spin started, and I just thought, boy, if I'd had $1 million, I could have put out this magazine, and done it better than them, and so and then for many years after Trouser Press ended in 1984, people would ask me, would you ever start it up again? I'm like, yeah, if you give me $1 million, I'll start it up again, because I am not doing it again from the ground up on a shoestring,
But you know what would have come with that, though? All kinds of demands to write about things you didn't want to.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's similar to when the first couple of years of IPO, I had people coming around offering to invest, but along with it would always be the condition that, well, you got to start booking this band or this band.
Yeah.
All right, let me hear them. And they had no melody at all.
Right.
No, I don't want your money.
Right. The irony in what I just said is that, I just, in the last couple of years, started a book publishing company, Trouser Press Books, with no money and no investors and no nothing. I'm just doing it all again from scratch. So,
you didn't learn your lesson, right? You didn't. That's well. What early on, Ira? What kept you going besides the love of music and discovering things? Did you get any good words from artists that you reviewed? Did you what made you kind of say, wow, somebody is paying attention to this?
Yeah, a couple of, one thing that we had done, Dave Schultz and I, he had this brilliant idea and we didn't really know about Pete Frame's family trees at the time, but he had this brilliant idea that we could go to the Manhattan the Lincoln Center Library, the Performing Arts Library, and use the microfilm of melody makers going back to the 50s or the 40s even, and generate a list of every British rock musician we could find, and what bands they were in and when, and what instruments they played and what records they were on. So we basically built up kind of like, if you can imagine a Pete Frame family tree boiled down to like a list rather than, a tree, we had done that. And so when we started interviewing artists, and we had the advantage, like a lot of fanzines did, of wanting to interview people nobody else wanted to interview. So, the Trogs came over and we're like, oh my God, we can fucking talk to the Trogs. This is so cool. And everyone else is like, the what? The Wild Thing? Oh, that was years ago. We don't care. Right. They're an oldies act. And Cockney Rebel. I had 2 interviews with Steve Harley that were completely nuts. Because he was like, why am I not a big star here? In England, he was having huge hits. And in America, he literally could have stood on Broadway, taken his clothes off, and nobody would have looked at him.
Right. Very true.
and yet there was I going like, that song, that second song, the B-side of that single is really amazing, and so he, a lot of British artists especially would say to us the thing that I'm sure a lot of fanzine writers have heard, which is, more about me than I do.
Yeah.
Because we came to them with knowledge and with curiosity. And with enthusiasm that they weren't going to get anywhere else. I just published a book called Backstage and Beyond by Jim Sullivan from Boston, well-known Boston Globe writer for many years. And he tells a story in the preface of the book about being a college student who hauled doing a radio show in Maine, who hauled a reel-to-reel tape recorder backstage of a Slade show early on, and interviewed them, and they were like over the moon that somebody wanted to interview them. Slade, wow, who could have, basically, commandeered like, Wembley Stadium at that point, were playing in some club in the backwoods, And yet here was this guy who knew their records and loved their music and wanted to talk to them. And they befriended him immediately. They took him on. And, that's the kind of experience we had. And then, we also, for a number of reasons, got to know a lot of people in the New York music business, publicists. And, so by 1977, we did what was, I guess, remains the most important interview we ever did, which was a Jimmy Page piece that Dave Schultz did, which was like a 5-hour interview about his career, about, not about Led Zeppelin specifically, but about, his session work, the Yardbirds, all the stuff that he had done before he was, Jimmy F. and Page. And, it ran in like 5 issues, and it's been syndicated and reprinted and quoted. And, it really put us on the map, I think, in a lot of ways.
What were some challenges? I mean, today you've got the internet, and you've got email, and you've got ways of contacting people within seconds. What were some challenges back in the 70s and 80s to getting not only the music and the product, but information to write some things? I mean, it's got to be a time challenge.
That's a good point, because there was nothing. I mean, we had to find it out for ourselves. I mean, other than like the microfilm research we did in the papers that we were reading from England, there was nobody to tell us about the bands that we liked. There were no books, there was no MTV, there was no internet, there was no, scholarly treatises on rock music, other than, the occasional Simon Frith thing. We just basically scraped together what we could from publicity handouts, bios from labels, and what we could read, and went and interviewed people and talked to them. But certainly it was incredibly slow compared to what it is now. I mean, you'd write a letter to somebody and hope they would write you back. I mean, right. Making a long distance phone call to England was like, oh my God, it's going to cost $5. It was just terrifying. Because our budgets were so tiny, and we had nothing to fall back on. And if we didn't have money, we couldn't print the magazine. So, we were very keen to stay on a schedule and to commit, fulfill our commitments and send out our subscriber copies. But for sure, setting things up was difficult, and back in those days, interviews were like, come up to the hotel room, and you could have an hour between 4 and 5, and sometimes it would end up being in a bar, and, I have interview tapes that are completely inaudible. I have no idea how I wrote articles based on waitresses going like, who wants the iced tea? And like 16 people talking at once, and in the middle of it, I'm asking somebody a question, and getting an answer sort of, but no, it was incredibly, we had no idea how difficult it was. And then, just producing the magazine, a monthly magazine that ran maybe 54 pages a month took literally 4 weeks to put together, because, we had to typeset it by hand, proofread it, fix it, lay it out. We just had to do all this work. And we had to take the pages, print it, the laid out pages to what was called a pre-press shop that would do negatives. And then the negatives had to go from the pre-press shop to the printing office in New York that would fly them out to Illinois where the printer was. It's just, everything was complicated.
Sure. I think that sounds like a podcast, Ira. You can call it like Decipher This, the Ira Robbins tapes.
Ira, you and I have quite a bit in common. I was born 4 years later than you, but I was born I lived in Poughkeepsie till I was 13. Mm-hmm. Then I moved to New City, Rockland County. Went to graduated NYU in 1981. And I think it was my years in NYU that I started going around to all kinds of New York record shops to find whatever I could find. I was a late bloomer. I didn't buy my first record until 1975. So I was already 17 or 16 going on. So anyway, but I caught the bug and started going to all kinds of places. I have to imagine that, especially when you were writing about some of these really obscure bands, we haven't talked about any of those yet, but I assume you went to a lot of the same record stores that I did.
For one thing, we were selling the magazines. We would bring the magazines and collect up returns and collect money, and we do all that stuff. I have no idea what that. I don't remember doing that. Maybe that was Carrie Baker. Anyway. I certainly spent time in every record store in New York. And plenty of it. As well as ones in England. That was like,
you were fortunate.
In 74, I spent a month. Here's a funny story. In 74, May of '74. I spent a month in England. Trouser Press had just started. I think we had 2 issues out, and I took like maybe 50 copies with me to England and went around to every record company, every press office in London, just to introduce myself and tell them about the magazine and hopefully to get on mailing lists. And what I got was people would give me records, and I was staying in a 8x12 room at the Russell Square Hotel. No, it wasn't called the Russell Square. It's the next one up, the Royal Hotel, which is actually where the Beatles stayed the first time they were in London. But by this time, it was like just a very small, a very kind of inexpensive, kind of traveler hotel.
What area of London is this now?
Russell Square. It's near Holborn.
Oh, all right.
And I ended up like at the end of the month, I had maybe, I don't know, 175, 200 records on the floor, albums.
Wow.
And okay, I had no way of listening to any of them, and I had no way of carrying them home. Like what was I going to do, right? I mean, like, buy 3 suitcases and pay, $500 to the airline and all the import duties. So I went up to Portobello. I went through them very carefully, picked out the ones that looked promising, put them aside, and took everything else up to Portobello Road and flogged it.
Damn! I can only imagine what you had.
It was the only way I could do it, Yeah. But I brought home good stuff. I brought home Bebop Deluxe and Cockney Rebel and Sailor and a lot of stuff that I still have. So yeah, no, it was a great time. I mean, it was a really interesting experience.
Jet? Did you bring home the Jet album? I don't know why that.
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah,
that looked too cool to pass up. Yeah.
And then also, very early on, we made a deal with Marty Scott at Gem Records, who were an importer in Plainfield.
Yeah.
And they became a distributor for us. They would sell Trouser Presses to record stores, and kind of in exchange, they would send us records that we wanted to review for like either for free or for cost. I can't remember which. I mean, it was very minimal cost. I mean, it certainly wasn't what stores were paying, because they understood that if we wrote about the records, they would sell more of them.
Right.
We were, I mean, they weren't putting them out. This was before PVC was a label. But Jam was bringing in lots of great stuff. And so, we would get these incredible boxes from them and just go completely hog wild. I mean, I remember all through 77, like getting like every 7-inch from like the Punk Parade. It's just kind of like, oh, Gen X. Wow, this is amazing. The Vibrators. This is amazing. Oh my God, Stiff Little Fingers. This is cool. It's like, it was incredible for me.
I'm jealous. Yeah. Took me 20 more years for something like that to happen, and never at the grand scale that it happened for you. Mm-hmm. What I just want to ask quickly, what were some of your favorite record shops in the late 70s? Because I'll mention I loved Farfels, Free Being, Golden Disc.
I mean, Second Coming was really good. Although
with Chuck Zaremba. No, Chuck was his first name.
No, Second Coming was Andre.
Oh, he must have owned it first then.
He was a bootlegger. But no, I went to Discophile. Discophile was a favorite because they were really, I knew them and they had great stuff. Went to Discount because Scott Eisler, who became the editor of Trouser Press, was the assistant manager there. Didn't go to much of the Midtown ones except like there was a Sam Goody's discount shop that I once bought like 80 10-cent albums at and hauled home. Where else? Midnight, of course, had great stuff. I mean, I did an article on the trouserpress.com website about where record stores in New York were, and it's got pictures of what's there now and some of my reminiscences about the stores that used to be in New York.
I had to think you must have gone to Golden Disc a few times.
Sure.
They had all the import. You walked in and you were deluged with these import 45s on the wall. It was amazing. Yeah,
I tried to stay out of Bleecker Bob's though.
Well,
as much as possible. You want to hear my funny Bleecker Bob story?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. I love Bleecker Bob stories.
In 1978, the Jam came over for the first time. And I had written a fairly negative review of their first album in Trouser Press, and Paul was a complete shit to me. I mean, he just wouldn't talk to me. We had like a breakfast meeting at like a hotel on Central Park South, and he just looked off in the distance. And I mean, he was a teenager and he was irritated, and I understood. But somehow, like he calmed down. Like I guess we talked at some point. And the next day, I had offered to like show him around the city because I mean, he literally was like a teenager. He was like 16 or 17 years old.
Yeah.
And he didn't know anybody here, and his dad was like, wasn't going to show him New York. So I said I'd show him around. So we go record shopping. So we went down to the Village. We went into Bleecker Bob's, and he sees the Charisma Creation compilation on the wall. You know, the one with the naked body and
yeah.
66, 67. And he get really excited, right? Because I mean, that was literally the only Creation album that was available then. None of the originals were available. And maybe Bob had them behind the counter, but they certainly weren't on the wall. And he pointed at it, got really excited and said, how much is that? And Bob said, $50. And I took Paul aside. I whispered in his ear, I've got 2 copies of that. I'll give you one tomorrow. And Bob heard me and threw me out of the store. But I did give Paul the record.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I mean, and the difference, Ira, between what you were covering in the mid to late 70s and then what happened like in the MTV generation and getting into the 80s. Just describe, like, you know, the different kinds of the music and how it changed in the 80s with the magazine.
We we were following what was going on in England, and we liked a lot of it, certainly through the early parts of like the New Romantics and the post-punk stuff. But it wasn't speaking to us in the same way. I mean, we were all getting a little older. We'd been doing it for a while. And when MTV came along, they kind of stepped on our toes unintentionally because, you know, they could show the bands and they could interview them in person on TV and they could play the music. And all we could do was write about them and quote them, you know, so they had it all over us in terms of that. And because the British bands were so ahead of the American bands doing videos, they became the band, like we were both covering the same bands, you know, Duran Duran, Culture Club, Haircut 100, Adam Ant, Big Country, those kinds of bands. And so we got into kind of a bind where we realized that MTV was giving us leverage with an audience that hadn't existed before. That was much bigger than the audience that we had, and that we could kind of piggyback on them. And so in a way, to be blunt about it, we tried to sell out. I mean, by sort of following them, not literally, but like the bands that we were interested in, we would write about and kind of put glossy covers on and hope that kids would buy them. And we discovered that our audience very quickly became like 10 years younger than it had been. Mm-hmm. We basically adapted ourselves inadvertently to the MTV audience, which was very young, and to kind of like and the problem, the unexpected problem that created was that, we were still the same, grouchy fucks that we'd always been, who would like rip a band an asshole if we didn't like something that they said or did. And, would also write from a point of view of like college educated, literate, people who didn't really expect, we never wrote down to people. We always wrote on our own level. And if people couldn't find the dictionary, well, too bad. We never tried to pander to anybody. And so we got this audience that was completely flummoxed as to why we were putting their favorite bands on the cover and then not raving about them simply, like, oh my God. So that became kind of this weird backlash, and it caused us a lot of agita because, we didn't want to be doing that. We didn't want to be writing stuff that people hated, but we weren't going to write what they wanted either. So we kind of got stuck. And eventually that led to, us deciding that it wasn't any fun anymore. We toughed it out until 84, but, we were running out of money and, personal lives being what they are, that was becoming a problem as well. And, nobody really wanted to earn $200 a week forever. And so, for a variety of reasons, that was kind of the death knell of Trouser Press. But you're absolutely right that, the music did change, and, we didn't become a smash hits, but we dabbled in it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, what was greatly appreciated by guys like David and I and everybody else is the fact that you did give your honest opinion in an opinionated kind of way on the music. I didn't have a lot of money to spend on records in the mid to late 70s and into the 80s. So, publications like Trouser Press and Cream and Crawdaddy and all those things, they meant a lot to me because before I went down to my local record shop and said, "Can you order this in for me, this import?" At least I read about it. And if you guys said this isn't worth the the vinyl it's printed on, then I usually didn't get it. And that was quite appreciated. In retrospect.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important to find. It's very important to find somebody with whom you feel you're a kindred spirit musically.
Absolutely.
And and also, and look at what they've written, see what the reference points are. And you were very, very, that was one thing I really appreciated. You were very good about that. You would always mention bands who had influenced the one you were writing about. And so that was a big, big help. But yeah, you had to have a way. And I was one who took a lot of chances. I was a little older than Mark, and I had a little bit more money. So I would go into record stores and I would take chances on stuff based on the band name, the album title, what they were wearing, what the song titles were. And occasionally I'd make a mistake. And,
Sure.
Thank God for you guys.
I can remember going to Record Revolution in Reading. It would take me 3 hours to start in the A section and end up in the Z section, and then going over to the 45s and doing the exact same thing. And that was quite the process of elimination of what I'm taking home today. Mm-hmm. But it always helped to have Trouser Press. God, such great memories of that magazine.
So Ira, what made you decide to start doing the publications, the record guides?
The record guides. Well, that was we were approached by a young editor at Scribner's who said, if you ever want to do a book, he was a fan of the magazine, and he said, if you ever want to do a book, holler. And I did, and he and I had a very high-strung lunch at a Brazilian restaurant where we each consumed about 8 cups of coffee, and by the end of which both of our cups were jangling like this. And at the end of it, we agreed that we would do a Trouser Press record guide. Obviously the Rolling Stone record guide had come out, but we said we'll do a new wave one. And the insane thing about that is when we did that book, which came out in I think late '83. This book.
There you go.
This Guide to New Wave Records. We actually thought, and we're not entirely wrong, that we could review every album that could reasonably be called new wave. I mean, that's how momentarily lucky we were at the time. It was just like, it had only been going for a few years. We had maybe, 2,500 records to review or 1,800 records or something. And it was manageable. It never was manageable again after that. And so that was the first book. And the coincidence is that the editor that signed that book up is now the CEO of Hachette. He ran Little Brown. He's pretty much one of the biggest publishing executives in America, and God bless him.
Wow.
But so we did 5 volumes, and then everything I did after that regarding Trouser Press was on a website. It was just the trouserpress.com. We put all the reviews from the books, the 5 books on there, and then we redeveloped it a couple of times, and now it's got articles and a lot of other elements. Got a chat board, which is really great. I recommend people go to it. And so that was going. I did that for about, I guess, on and off about 25 years. And then a couple of years ago, I decided to use the Trouser Press name as a book publishing company. And so we've now done 11 books as Trouser Press Books, which I'm very happy about. And
did you publish Time Has Come Today?
Yes.
Yeah, I just picked that up. And in fact, I want to have Harold on the show as well. But that's well, first of all, the thing that first drew me to it was the cover. I mean, it just spoke to me, the colors wise, I suppose. Then I saw who had written it, and it was like, okay, well, I want to know what he went through.
That's great. Where did you buy it, David?
Where? At Freak Beat Records in Sherman Oaks. Mm-hmm. You probably know Bob Say.
I sure do.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I'm very proud of that book because Harold, the co-founder of Rhino Records, put out more records that I own probably than any other label at this point.
Really?
Well, just think of the records that Rhino put out.
Maybe the highest percentage. You probably own the highest percentage of what they put out than any other label.
That's for sure. Because there's, obviously the major labels put out, thousands of records that I had zero interest in. And the indie labels didn't put out anywhere near as many records. But, Rhino just kept churning out, records by bands. Any serious anthology by an artist of any consequence, I'm going to listen to. How would I not want to know, what the best of, Suzi Quatro sounded like, or the best of, the Knickerbockers, or the best of, Don and Dewey. I'm down, so I kept all that stuff. It's all myself.
Bill Inglot mastered a lot of that stuff. And
no doubt.
It sounded great. The best of the Bo Brummels, Bobby Fuller 4.
Yeah, all of them are
late 80s. They were amazing.
All of them are in Harold's book. He really talks about the experiences he had dealing with these artists, And, he's somebody that went from being, a fan, like us, to being a writer like us, to being, the guy that sat in a room with, Randy California and argued with him about what songs to put on his album. So he took the whole circuit. And it's a great book. I'm very proud of it. But like I said, we've done a bunch of others, which I'm very happy with. Mitchell Cohen did a biography, who was an A&R man at Arista, as well as being a longtime writer, did a book about a history of Arista, kind of up to the point that Whitney Houston became their superstar. And that's a really great book. It's called Looking for the Magic, a name you'll recognize. And we've done 2 volumes of Jim Sullivan's Backstage and Beyond, which is an anthology of his music writing, Boston Globe writer, but it's really good stuff. The first volume is classic rock, and the second volume, which is coming out next week, is all punk, new wave, and no wave, and post punk. And each one of them has like 25, 30 chapters on each one on an artist, and they're not just articles that he previously published. They're integrated collections of articles about an individual artist that he kind of wove together. So they're really interesting things, and he has a lot of great stories to tell. I recommend them highly.
Who are some of your favorite people in the biz, either bands or writers? People you've met and gotten to know and befriend.
Bands, well, I got to know Cheap Trick. That's been fun.
And they were good. They're all good. I met Tom Peterson. He was the nicest guy ever. So,
but he's also the most sardonic human being you will ever meet.
Funny enough, not to me, but yeah, it's true. He didn't take compliments particularly well.
He's very droll and can be real. I say this with all due affection. He can be really mean.
Wow.
I forget what it was. He was doing an interview that I heard later, not with me, and somebody mentioned my name, and he said, "Ira Robbins, I thought he was dead."
Yikes!
That's Tom's idea of humor.
Yeah.
But I love him. He's a great guy.
How about UK artists or the punk early new wave scene?
Well, the obvious ones, but also, I kind of have a huge spot in my heart for like really oddball people. So like John Otway, Frank Sidebottom, who you will see the poster in the back is a poster.
Funk you.
It's a tea towel. What?
Funk you. I learned about Frank Sidebottom through you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Frank, John Otway, I love. John Cooper Clarke, I love. I'm kind of a sucker for like incredibly thick Scottish and Irish and English accents. And John Cooper Clarke's got a Mancunian accent that's like you can cut with a knife. But he's a lovely guy also. But I've met a lot of people, and a lot of them turned out to be really nice, which is great.
That's what you hope. That's what you hope for. I always had trepidation about meeting some of my heroes. Like, what if they're assholes? Will I be able to enjoy their music anymore?
Yeah,
you want to separate the artist from the art, but if it becomes personal, then it could be difficult.
Yeah, obviously, most of the times I've met people has been through journalism, and so there's a kind of a forced structure. But there's people that I've gotten to know a little bit. Yeah.
Was there ever in the prime of Trouser Press, was there ever an artist that you would have loved to sat down and interviewed, but you never could make it happen?
Sure. We only got one swing at Elvis Costello in those days, and that was a phoner that Dave Schultz did. I ended up interviewing Elvis many years later, and I found him fascinating and really lovely to talk to. But we tried to get the Pistols, and Malcolm hung up on us a couple of times. Literally hung up on us. We called Glitter Best, and he would put down the phone. I did a round robin with the Clash the first time they were here, and I had an incredible experience. I spent the day in the CBS's Basing Street studio. I guess it's Island's Basing Street studio when they were recording "Give 'Em Enough Rope" because I knew Sandy Pearlman a little bit through the Dictators. And he invited me to come while they were recording Tommy Gun, and Topper was doing like the 853rd run through of the drum part of Tommy Gun, and I loaned Joe Strummer a pen to write the lyrics to English Civil War.
Yeah, I spent a whole night one night with the Professionals post Sex Pistols, came out of the club when the sun was coming up. I don't remember a thing about it, just that I was there. So those are the days in North Jersey and into the city where those bands were playing all the time. Oh God, it was such a great time. So you really had, the nice part about that era is you had access to a lot of clubs in North Jersey, in the city, and bands were playing, all the time. East Coast Rocker or EC Rock, whatever it was called. The advertisements to list where everybody was almost too much.
Did you, speaking of which, did you go to the Dirt Club early on, see the Smithereens? Oh, you didn't?
I never did, no.
Okay, so did you catch the Smithereens early, or?
I knew, oddly, I knew Dennis because he worked at a T-shirt store that made Trouser Press's T-shirts.
Oh,
I think that was before the Smithereens were a going concern, actually, probably 76.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
He worked at a store in I forget what town, but they made T-shirts for us. I don't know how that worked, but they did. And then I saw the Smithereens plenty, but they played New York a lot. I tried to get married at Max's Kansas City in 1976. That didn't work out because the band we wanted to be our wedding band was the Dictators, and that was after Manitoba's Punch Up with Wayne County. They were banned.
So what'd you end up doing then?
We got married at a church in Astoria, and then had the reception at the St. Regis, I think, on Central Park South. Not exactly the rock and roll wedding we were hoping for.
I'm sure it wasn't bad.
Couldn't get the Fast or somebody to play, right?
No, but that was actually my first marriage, and my current marriage, which we just celebrated our 25th anniversary. We had Yola Tingo as our band.
Oh, nice. Well, there you go.
Nice.
They played a full set of covers. They played a 90-minute set of covers that basically were things that I liked, and I wish someone had taped it because I was drunk off my ass the entire time. I don't remember a thing about it.
Oh no. It's kind of, I'll just tell you briefly, it's kind of like how I proposed to my wife on the stage of the Cavern Club.
Right.
We do IPO there every year.
I know.
And it was a completely spontaneous thing. I noticed that in the crowd were a lot of our friends, and I don't know, it just came. I said, why don't I propose to her here? She'll never suspect. So normally I would bring her on stage at some point during the festival to thank her for her help. And so I told her, come up on stage. I'm going to thank you. And I did. And then I got down on one knee, and like the whole crowd just burst, into
Did you
cheers.
have a ring?
And pardon?
Did you have a ring?
I did not have a ring. It was completely spontaneous. And of course, Reno was shocked, but very happy. And it was all really nice. But like you, we actually had a videographer there who were taping the bands.
Oh, of course.
And the one person I wanted to make sure nobody knew. No, I was not. Well, I was drunk with love for sure. But no, I didn't want anyone to know about this. And the one guy I should have told was our videographer. What was going on, and I didn't tell him.
Great.
And so all I have is one grainy picture that some guy took in the crowd. So yeah, I know exactly how you feel.
You gave her a piece of the original Cavern brick.
Yeah, there you go.
She's got on her finger these days. That's funny. That's good.
Well, I have to tell you, I've always wanted to tell you this. The one thing, I mean, obviously I remember a lot of the stuff from the 80s guide, the one from the early 90s, but the one thing that always sticks is a review that you didn't write. It's not even a review. It's just a couple of words on G.G. Allen. When whoever did write that, ICM, who is that?
Ian McCallum.
Ian McCallum was talking about a particular album, and he said, and it was produced by, and then in parentheses, he wrote, get this, Dick Urin.
Right.
And the get this was so great. I don't laugh much. When I saw that, I fell on the floor. And I use it a lot now in everyday conversation to refer to something that's either a surprise or absurd or whatever.
Right.
So that was a great one.
Oh, fantastic. Ira, I know you need to get going shortly, but again, just wanted to say thank you so much for all the work. I mean, that was just,
Yeah, we all owe you a great deal of gratitude. No doubt about it.
I had fun, except for the 90s book. That one was almost fatal.
Why did you say that?
I agreed to do it. I mean, I signed a contract for it without seriously considering how much work it was going to be. I mean, like, in terms of the nuts and bolts of what it was going to take. And I'm kind of a deadline respecter. I mean, I don't blow deadlines under any circumstances.
Right.
I'd have to literally be like, unconscious.
It's very important. Yeah.
And so I had I think 11 months to do that book, or 12 months. And once I got started, I started like calculating how many records we had to write, how many records we had to review, and how many records I had to edit, and how much time each one took. And I ended up working on that book. I was writing on the order of a dozen to 15 reviews a day, like getting up at 7 a.m, putting on a record, writing a review, drinking coffee, putting on a record, writing a review. I mean, I probably listened to less than 10% of those records more than once. Which is a really dicey way of reviewing, but I was just kind of like under the gun. And at the end of it, I mean, I was working 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. I went to one concert that entire year. I went to see Neil Young with Sonic Youth opening at the Garden. And it was just completely nuts. And at the end of it, I was just like, I'm never going to listen to another record, and I'm never going to write another word about music. That was 30 years ago. So obviously I've rethought that, but it was like, I can't do this again. So that I knew then that we were never going to do another record guide, because it was just insane, because, so much was coming out, and the formats got all complicated, I mean, we were, when we started, we were like, oh, this is on LP. This is a 7-inch. This is a 4-song EP. This is a CD. This is a cassette, and then it became like, everything's everything, and then all of a sudden it became like digital. It's like, what do you do there? And then, like, people were putting out like laser discs with music. It's like, I gave up.
Yeah.
So you're on your own now.
Very. Now, well, fortunately, some people have taken the reins and are writing about the kind of music we love. So, so you left that legacy as well. So we appreciate that.
And let me say that I appreciate, David, everything you've done to keep the music going and alive and spread and vibrant, and giving all those bands a chance to play for the people that are going to like them.
Indeed.
But I've never met Dick Urin, so I
you probably will. You probably will.
You will now.
Hi, I'm Dick Urin.
And he's, get this.
Wow, I wonder if he goes around saying, hey, get this, I'm Dick Urin.
He should.
Ira, thanks so much for joining us here on Material Issues, episode number 124. What a great chat. Just great publications, and we wish you the best with everything you got coming up. Anything special on the near horizon? You said you have something.
No, our two latest books are the second volume of Backstage and Beyond by Jim Sullivan, and the Harold Bronson book, Time Has Come Today.
Yeah,
and,
it's a really fun book. Just for people out there, it's a diary of what Harold
40 years. Yeah, and you can order it from trouserpressbooks.com.
Right there on the screen, trouserpressbooks.com.
You should. I mean, he was a fan like us who went and forged his path. So you should check it out. It's fun.
All right, guys.
Fantastic. All right, Ira, thank you so much. Have a great night. Stay happy, healthy, grateful, and we'll talk to you again in the near future. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, there was Ira Robbins, Trouser Press magazine, 70s into the early 80s, Trouser Press record guides. I mean, as we discussed, David, like that we got to use the word iconic in our youth to record collecting.
I think Mr. John Borick would agree that within that sphere, he's very iconic.
Yeah, it's amazing to me whenever we do this show. We have guests on the show, like last week with Fred Harris, and I know he was watching tonight. So if you're still on there, Fred, hi, Fred.
Hey, Fred.
That to have read that book in the 70s and to have talked to Fred on the show last week, and now to have read every Trouser Press magazine and the record guides, and then to have Ira here.
It means so much. It means so much to us because, back in the day, I mean, it was just a pipe dream to meet any of these people, no matter who they were. I mean, and at that point, when I was buying records in the late 80s, meeting somebody, let's say like Jeff Murphy of Shoes versus meeting someone like Paul McCartney, they both seemed equally far-fetched.
I had to wait.
How is it going to happen?
Yeah, I know.
And you know, I put these people on equal playing fields also. So it was
Yeah.
like, and here we are. You know, I know the guys from Shoes. You know, I'm very friendly with them, and yeah, we should get if we can get all three of them on, we really should.
Yeah.
In fact, now I'm gonna reach out and see if they'd be willing to do it.
Yeah.
But and of course, there are a couple of books out on Shoes where their story's been told, but it's been a little while, so people really do need to know. But yeah, it's just been so much fun meeting these people from our youth and from, you know, even our young adult, mid-adult days. That
and
before we did this podcast, we weren't going to meet them.
No, and what's really cool is so many of the stories kind of parallel each other. It's like, well, we just thought we would do this. We didn't have any grand plans, whether it's a band recording music, whether it's someone like Ira and friends who got together and say, let's start a fanzine or a zine of some sort. And then it just kind of, it develops. And then all the years afterwards, people say to him, this was awesome what you did. This was really great. And sometimes when it's happening to you, you don't think how much it affects other people over a distant period of time. People talk to you, David, and say, thank you so much for International Pop Overthrow for all the years. Now to you, it's just a labor of love and you do it and you don't look at it as you look at like a Fred Harris or an Ira Robbins.
No,
I don't think about, all the great stuff on Pop Detective Records, but I get people all the time that drop me messages saying, just heard this, just heard that, awesome, da, 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 da. But I don't think about that when I was doing it. And it kind of grew and developed. And just to jump on that, Pop Detective Records will have a new website very soon. It's going to be very cool. And there's some other things. There's some other things going on with Pop Detective.
You mentioned how it's not the same. What we do is, I remember, the stories when the Beatles finally met Elvis. I mean, the idea to the Beatles that they were on a similar plane as Elvis was unfathomable.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
exactly,
even when they were the biggest band in the world and everybody knew who they were, Elvis was still a god to them.
Exactly. Yeah.
None of them ever thought, well, we've achieved what he did, maybe even surpassed it.
Mm-hmm.
Never. It was like, oh my God. Even then, oh my God, it's Elvis.
Exactly.
And it's still the same. It's the same to me. I mean, meeting people in these bands is a big thrill.
It really is. And the authors that we talk, our good friend John Borak, we look at John as a good friend. He's part of the Material Issues family here. But John's an accomplished writer, and we look at him as John, but other people look at him as this guy wrote some great stuff. And he may not get that that feeling about himself or when he's hanging out with you and I just here, but everybody who puts that kind of
John is arrogant enough to.
Yeah, he's a bit. Yeah, he is a bit of a tool.
The top,
But no, it's just
I once asked him for his autograph. I didn't think it would be a big deal, and I was right. That's a quote. That's a quote from Ball 4. So
Ball 4. I was going to say it's going to be another Ball 4.
John knows I'm kidding about that, but
I love it. But it is a lot of fun. I mean, and we're 124 episodes into this Material Issues thing, which is also a little bit mind blowing. So if you haven't subscribed on Facebook or joined the group or subscribed over at YouTube, do it. Tell your friends this is a great place to hang out. And we love it. We got one more guest scheduled in the next couple of weeks. So we're working on a lot more things. But
there will definitely be more. But yeah, we don't have a guest scheduled next week, which is fine because we haven't done one. Oh. Now that's BS because when he met me, I had my hair.
Yeah. See,
in 93 when we met, I definitely had hair, but it was kind of going south. It's true, but I had it. I wasn't doing the comb over yet. God, the dreaded comb over.
Oh, you go.
No, I remember meeting John. It was through Darian Sahanaja because both John and I had written to Darian asking about Wonderman's cassettes, and so Darian told both of us, you need to meet each other. And I met John in his apartment And, I thought I knew everything about power pop, and then he started playing me stuff I didn't know. I was A, blown away by the fact that he knew stuff that I didn't, and B, blown away by what he was playing me. Yeah, it was quite impressive. I returned the favor when he came over to my place, and I started playing him 60s soft pop.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't sure if he was going to like it, because I thought John's just a power pop guy. Of course, yeah. Well, tonight, not today. Sorry, I know I'm going to get the Mike Simmons response, but that's another inside joke. But anyway, I was playing him things like the Yellow Balloon and the Fun and Games, and he's going, "That's great." I was so thrilled because I thought he was going to say, "Oh, that's just soft crap," But no, he liked it.
It's all good though. It's good stuff. It's just a fun ride. It's a fun ride, and I appreciate hanging out here with you. We're 124 episodes.
Likewise.
Hopefully we got just as many in front of us as we do behind us.
Or more.
More
for sure. But yeah, on the 25th we have.
Well, next week. Yeah, next week is open.
Is just us. And the 25th we have the iconic main man of the Stems and DM3, and one of the members of the Some Loves, and he's going to be coming from Perth, Australia. So for him, it'll be the 26th. But many of you already know that it's Mr. Dom Mariani on Material Issues in a couple of weeks.
It's going to be great. Yeah.
And I'm working on somebody who's a music attorney / author, someone who wrote a book about musicians and basically how to protect yourself from the evil empire known as labels. And so I definitely want to get her on, because I think it'll resonate with a lot of musicians. So apparently she's interested, but we just have to connect the dots. She's somebody that my brother Joel knows through his business endeavors. And he said you should have her on, and hopefully we will. So that's all I can say now, because it hasn't been confirmed, but we're hoping to get that going in early November, and there will be a whole bunch of other people. Now I'm going to contact Shoes to see if we can get them. So
yeah, and in the interim, we haven't played some Stump the Bash type things. We'll have that going on. Everybody enjoys that.
Next week for sure.
Yeah, next week for sure. So
are we going to do the Borak game?
Yeah, you've been bashed.
Are we going to do that for 1978? I mean, that's up to you, because you're the one who prepares it.
Well, I can get it going. It's just a matter of when John can jump in.
I mean, if he can jump in,
that'd be great. We'll do 1978 with the,
so that he can wipe the floor with me, which I think he will. But you
okay.
never know. If you ask the right questions, maybe not.
Maybe not.
Anyway, we're working on stuff as always.
Yeah, and I'll be live from Epcot on the 25th with Dom Mariani, and we're doing that later. That's going to be a later show, correct? That's 8:00 Eastern.
Yeah, that'll be unlike this one, it'll be 2 hours later.
2 hours later, yeah.
To accommodate Dom's schedule, because it would be like 6 a.m. in Perth to do.
Well, we also have to put that transcriber, because just like the toilet water that goes the opposite direction in Australia, when he speaks, his words will come out from the end of the sentence to the beginning. So there's a gap there. We have to put it through a special filter here on StreamYard. And
I'm glad you have that. Well, yeah.
It's all good. So we look forward to it. Yeah, I mean, stay tuned. Always, like I said, join the group on Facebook. Subscribe at materialissues.com, and we'll let you know what we got coming up. And of course, we're approaching the whole holiday season, so who knows what's going to happen here at Material Issues and with David and I.
Absolutely. So yeah, everyone, again, thanks so much for accommodating our schedule this week and Ira's schedule. And everyone have a great rest of the week.
And God bless those in peril in Israel, and
thank you.
Just thoughts and prayers so that is resolved in some fashion to stop the atrocities.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. All right, everyone. Take care. We'll see you next time.
See you soon here on Material